Okay, everyone, welcome back. Thank you for everyone who's participated. What a fun day. And thank you to all the panelists. This has just been fabulous. So I'm excited to end the day on this one, replacing Dogma with Connection. And very excited about our participants. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give very brief introductions and kick it over to the panel and then ask, before each of you speaks, if you'll be kind enough to augment that brief introduction a bit, that would be great. And then this is designed to be a 2-hour discussion. I think we could go all day on this, but this is going to be great. So no one's rushed, and this is going to be a clubhouse style discussion. Okay, I'll go ahead and start with the introductions. Tammy Harris is a fellow life traveler and a licensed massage therapist and energy worker mover, specializing in Reiki, acupressure, and cranial sacral therapy. And she's awesome. I know this firsthand, and an awesome human being. She's also a certified life coach with Symmetry Solutions in Salt Lake City. Cole, who I think is going to join us by phone for the first little while. She had something that went a bit long. How do I introduce Cole? Just a force of nature, former teen Miss Utah. Annie or Carla was talking about the DARE program. She was a DARE speaker. And just quite an evolution, quite a path. She now is a psychedelic teacher, I'm going to say, for sitters, clinicians, coaches. She teaches about inclusivity, reciprocity, sustainability, and financial health. Any of you can feel free to correct this when it's your turn. Jason Olson is a serial entrepreneur, and that includes the founder of Image Studios. That's a salon suite franchise with 102 locations nationwide and counting, growing fast. And Pressman Auto, they sell independent dealership, more than 2,000 vehicles per year. Jason's just an extraordinary human who can do everything. He went on a Mormon mission to Sydney, took mushrooms 2 years after, and I think mushrooms turned you gay, Jason. Isn't that the story? And married Tim, and they're just awesome. So then we have the 3 Mormon on Mushrooms fellow group. We'll start with Shalise. Shalise grew up a Mormon in Utah. She left the Mormon church when she was 20. And then, like a lot of us are working on, she did a deep dive into spirituality. And with the help of psychedelics, she healed a lot of wounds of childhood abuse. And now she works as an actress and costumer and advocate in Los Angeles. And Mike and Doug, I'm just going to completely let you two introduce yourself. I don't know where you're at in your journey, but for now, they're just like one name Brazilian soccer stars, Mike and Doug. So with that, let me start off the panel by just asking, okay, what are we talking about? To kick it off, what does it mean to replace dogma with spirituality? Have at it. I know you're not a shy bunch.
Hey, our Mormons on Mushroom people, this is your thing. Like, your podcasters, speak to us, please. I'm Tammy, and actually one other thing about Jason is he's my little brother, and he's the one that introduced me to this beautiful world of psychedelics. So I had my first mushroom trip with my siblings, and Jason was the one that introduced me into the beautiful realm of psychedelics and spirituality in that aspect. For me, ultimately, I think what I believe, like removing dogma out of my life and bringing connection in, has become finding the authority in my own self, taking my authority back from what I was told that spirituality and religion were, letting me create my own checklists instead of just, doing what other people, authority, parents, prophets, all of that. My journey has been a little bit different out. I don't think I would have ever gone out in the same capacity. I think I never grew up really having major trauma. The church was a beautiful thing for me. I had wonderful experiences in it. Had an amazing, born of goodly parents, still are. But my journey was beautiful in the church. And so I took a different journey out, actually, through diving head first into scripture and realizing that what I was reading in scripture wasn't matching what was being taught at church on Sunday. And it wasn't matching the way that Jesus Christ lived his life. 7 years later, though, I do see a lot of the dark underbelly of it. But anyway, that's an intro for me, and I'll pass it on to whoever wants to jump in.
I'll jump in. So let's see. Not sure how I can get my video on. I keep having issues, but I'm Jason Olson. I'm Tammy's little brother. And yeah, it's interesting because I think when you look at dogma, a principle or a statement of ideas or something that just becomes accepted collectively in a group, Mormonism has a lot of that. And what's interesting, I think for me, was that with psychedelics, as you start to explore, you start to realize that there is a lot of universal truth that you can discover on your own. And it was a journey of starting to discover what kind of dogma will I create for myself? What kind of set of standards or principles that I believe to be true. It's no longer what I'm told is true and everyone else reaffirms that. It's more of an individual truth, which is pretty cool and also a little bit scary because coming from Mormonism, there's a lot of things you don't have to think about. You're sort of given those directions, and so it's a really easy way. It's like a career path for your life. It's all laid out for you. But there's been an interesting and really fulfilling process of going down that road just myself. So, and I still remember that day where I introduced Tammy to mushrooms, and remember her crying at the end, going, "Is it really this beautiful for everyone?" And of course, we all have different experiences, but it was just fun to share that with family, and what a great experience to have with another sibling. So, but yeah, Steve, I don't know. Can you turn my video on? I'm trying to figure out, but I'll let someone else jump in too while we work on that.
Yeah, so let's just stop for a second and make sure everyone's here. On our end, it shows we have authorized everyone to turn on video. Jason, you don't have a button down on the bottom left, start video?
No, just a mute option, that's it, which is odd on Zoom because it's always got that other option there. So
we're clicking on something that says ask to start video, but it's not happening, right?
No.
Dang. Well, we'll continue to work on that, but I need to clarify, was I there at that first mushroom experience? No? Okay.
No, it was conference weekend of 2017, and it was actually, it was a whole family event, so there were 4 siblings there, and Tim, my brother-in-law, Jason's husband, and my sister-in-law as well. Best day ever, by the way.
So Jason, I don't know what to do. We have your pretty picture, but we'll continue to work on the video.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll I'll jump in here real quick and introduce myself. Everybody, okay, hear me okay? So,
Yeah.
my name's Doug. I'm sitting next to my co-host, Mike, of the podcast Mormons on Mushrooms. We are having some technical difficulty headphones, so I hope you can as it should be. But yeah, just to add to leaving Mormonism was about becoming a better father than I considered the God I was taught existed. And really it was about eliminating that middleman and getting in touch with the divine within myself and in touch with the divine in the people I loved and that were all around me. And I'm Doug, and I'll hand this little tiny microphone over to Mike.
Is it right here? Can you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed a lot of what Tammy said just because I was having technical difficulties on my phone. But I think one thing I'll add to all this is with the dogma. I don't know. The more I've gone on this journey, the more I feel like it's the journey of individuation, of trying to find out what works for me, and what works for me doesn't work for anyone else, or it might not work for you. And so, dogma, there's this, this approach of it works for me, so it should work for you, and that's usually coupled with shame and fear in order to instill that belief in people, or the fear of that. And so for me lately, and I love the slides before here where it was talking about another Dallin H. Oaks, replacing that, because that's a fear I've had I left the church 7 years ago and became a hardcore atheist for a while until I found mushrooms, and it's opened the door up to this new realm of spirituality. But during this whole process, I've been worried that, am I just jumping into something else? But the difference between what I'm learning now and what I learned before is there's no shame in it. I'm going to put my arm around you.
Yeah, I'll put my arm around. There we go.
There's no shame in what we had before, or there is now. There's shame in what it was before, and now it's just a discovery of myself. And that's what I've loved about it. And so that's what I want to keep leaning into, is this self-discovery, and wherever it brings me. And I'm Mike, and I'm done speaking for now.
I love you, Mike.
All right, so I can pop in here now that I'm home. I was driving. So first of all, my name is Cole Whitty. I grew up in Utah and left Utah in 2002, moved to New York City. And my path is a bit more like Tammy's in that I didn't leave because I had any grievances necessarily. For me, it was more inconsistencies, and I didn't see authenticity in what people were teaching and what was being experienced. And so for me, it was more, it made me not trust people. What they said and how they performed just really it didn't feel aligned to me. And so the thing that's interesting with my story to even be in this conversation right now is I got into substance abuse as a teen, as is a common thing I'm learning now as an adult. In Utah, when there are sexual encounters between families or neighborhood or something like that, people don't talk about it. At least where I was, things were swept under the rug. And so I had assaults on my sexuality very young that happened the week after I got baptized, which made me feel ruined. And so in essence, that's when my grades got worse. By the time I was a teen, I was an at-risk youth, 3 different high schools, went to Valley, Riverton. Did I go to Riverton? I can't even, briefly. When Riverton first opened, I went there. But most of my time was spent at Valley. By the time I hit 17, I had even more trauma, violent rapes, all sorts of things, and no support or people equipped to. My parents are wonderful people. They were not equipped for not only me, but the experiences that I had. And so it was just something that wasn't really discussed. And that turned into internal rage. That rage turned into destructive behavior. And then getting into, we're talking the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when the rave scene was pretty kicking live and well in Salt Lake City underground. And that got me into substances, ecstasy, ketamine, all of the above. The thing that was interesting is I wasn't using substances to get high. I was doing it to connect. It was actually the only space I was meeting people that it felt authentic, that I felt seen, that I felt considered. But by the time December 1st of 2000 rolled around, I overdosed from GHB into a coma. The short version of the story is it was GHB that someone tried to chemically recreate, so I was poisoned. It wasn't that I took too much. And so it was a sign to me that the road I was on was going to be a short road if I continued down that path. And what really got me to shift things was my little sister was starting to get into some of this substance abuse, and in a very heavy way in contrast to me. And I knew if I was going to save her, I needed to save myself. And so I went and did Miss Utah Teen USA, which is the Miss USA lineage just for teens. I won. The platform was substance abuse education. And I told the state, I was very honest. I said, hey, if anyone's going to teach anyone about the dangers of club drugs, it should be me, or it could be me. They agreed. And I became the poster child for the DARE program and Partnership for a Drug-Free America. And I got thrown really hard into the once an addict, always an addict cosmology. And for many years, I mean, I was sponsored by JetBlue. I did the Montel Williams show, national talk shows, news articles, you name it, was all covered. But what I was finding is how often my story was being manipulated for someone else's narrative. They'd leave pieces out, and no matter how much I required or asked or said I wouldn't do the interview unless I got to see it edited first, they wouldn't honor that. And once it's out, it's out. There wasn't anything I could do. And by the time I was 21, I was answering 200 plus emails a day. And what I was seeing was not that we had a drug problem, we had a trauma problem. We had a social poverty, racial, like we had a lot of other things that were contributing to people using substances to survive, to live, to at least die a little bit slower so that maybe they had the hopes of finding peace on the other side of it. And so to end up in the psychedelic space now, as you could imagine, not only the Mormon components and the conservative and all of that, but then having to deconstruct the once an addict, always an addict paradigm that I got so deeply ingrained in, but I saw wasn't working. And I saw that we were disempowering people in saying that once you are this, you will never be anything different. And so it was about 6 years after that I got introduced to psychedelics and power plants in a therapeutic healing capacity, and started changing my whole life. That was 13 years ago. And so I feel like I've fully circumferenced this war on drugs, and I'm here really to share a story that isn't a common one, that is really important as we talk about dogma, as we talk about going from one box to another. There's also the psychedelic box or the shamanic boxes that exist, and what it means to actually explore spiritual sovereignty. So that's the shortest version I can give as far as an introduction to me. I'm thrilled, excited to be here and down for the conversation. So it's a little bit about me.
Well, your story is so inspiring. Thank you for sharing. So for me, releasing Dogma meant asking questions, finding answers, and being excited about finding answers. So what I found in religion, I always had questions, but I was shut down. So curious to learn more and tell me about this, and why is the afterlife that way, and why do we have to practice polygamy? Like, I'm not doing that. And every time I would ask all of these questions, it would just be, I don't know, have faith. And I would just get shut down. And that really bothered me as someone who loves exploring. I finally came to the bishop with like a literal binder of questions and research that I had found, trying to prove the church was true. I was like, I need all these questions now. And I didn't get anything. I realized it was time for me to move on. It wasn't working for me anymore. And so then I opened myself up to a new world of questions with so many rabbit holes. Fun was on my terms, and there was no governing body telling me, well, you have to believe this way, or you have to see it this way to heaven. It was just, the options were endless at this point. And that's what really got me excited. And that's what really connected me to duality, releasing the old dogma and then coming up with a way to nurture my own spirituality. And plant medicine for me was really like the bow and arrow effect, right? Like I was just so pulled back. I had just uncovered all of this trauma from my childhood, these memories that I didn't know that I had blocked. And I was just as far back as you could go with the bow and arrow. And then plant medicines just shot me into the cosmos in a pretty much a literal way. And it was so amazing and eye-opening. And I just realized the deep connections that we can find through plant medicines, not just with God, but with myself as a part of God. And so everything just totally opened up and expanded for me.
So just to add to what you said there, which is so great, is in Mormonism, we were always given, this is the answer in the back of the book. And so there wasn't that exploratory. You could explore what those answers that they gave you. But what I love now, it's like anything is possible. And in like the last episode of the podcast we just released, we talk about explore everything, believe nothing. And that kind of saying is like anything's possible, let's explore it. And it's the inspiration. I want to add that part there.
Where do we go from here?
So maybe I'm curious, just with the other panelists, what for you has it been mushrooms or ayahuasca or some other medicine of any kind that you feel has connected you most to that source of truth?
Well, I'll share mine and just keep the conversation moving and shaking. So for me, it's depended on which part of my journey. Now that it's been 13 years, there was a lot to deconstruct for me, not only on an emotional, spiritual standpoint, but on a physical standpoint. I had a lot of health conditions, endometriosis, an ovarian torsion, fibromyalgia. I had a 40-degree curve of scoliosis, migraines. I mean, I had a lot of broken bones, accidents, all this crazy stuff that needed to be addressed in my physical body. So I did a lot of healing. I felt emotionally and in spirit. And then that started to translate into body. And so depending on which part of the journey depends on which, for me, supported alignment. I think that initially the possibility of, well, I didn't really know possibilities because I was terrified going back to it the first time. But when I look back on my journey, the things that were most impactful, San Pedro or Wachuma was most impactful for the healing of my physical body and grounding me in the presence of now. What do I believe outside of the noise, socially, relationally, familially, and getting really clear in what that means to me, and then being able to talk to my physical body. You know, like, hey, shoulder pain, when you're cueing me, when you're hurting, what are you trying to tell me? And translating my body's unique language. And then when I look at how mushrooms really connected me to my perception, my experience of God, as far as on a spiritual sense, the feeling of being connected to everything on a outside of this third dimensional, was huge. And then ayahuasca in the jungles, to experience traditions that were so out of context of anything I'd ever experienced before, showed me aspects outside of English language or words that I didn't have any preconceived understanding of, and helped to show me these well, for simplicity purposes, indigenous traditions that are more connected to the earth and listening to the spirit of where they are. And so for me, it's been different things at different points, but it's my favorite conversation to talk about helping people to decide which substance when, because every substance is not for every person, for every part of their journey or otherwise. And really checking in with the body on what is consensual for the body, not just for the mind, not just for what we think in the heart, but what is the body okay to explore right now? What is the body okay if something is very purgative or demanding on the system, and someone's got endocrine issues or thyroid conditions or autoimmune, putting them in something in ayahuasca could be too much for the system. And so for me, it really depended at which point, which I'm always down to go deeper into, but that's mine's been an exploration of lots of them.
Yeah, no, thanks. And there's a question by Grace. Is there any danger in having psychedelics become part of your identity, just like religion can? And I love that question because I think absolutely yes. I've seen, James Fadiman was in town, I think about a year and a half ago for a psychedelic conference here in town. And he talked about this a little bit. He said that psychedelics, a lot of people feel like they meet God for the first time in their life. But there's also a lot of ego that can attach to that. And people start thinking they may be God or God-like in some way. And he said something, he said the interesting thing that if people don't have this progression, they get stuck in that. But then the reality is you eventually realize everyone else is God. So it's not just you that got to see this experience, it's also everyone else. And so I think I've seen some of that in psychedelics too, where it can kind of get a hold of you if you're not careful in how you integrate and how that affects your ego. So I love that question though, because that's something that I think people should also keep in mind on how you integrate healthy aspects into your life without becoming pious or better than in some cases because of an experience you've had. And a lot of times people don't have any idea what you're trying to explain to them when you have an experience if they've never done it too. So then you have that struggle too, which is you share, you don't want to sound like a crazy person. So it's always a interesting thing to go through, and everyone goes through it, I think, on some level. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has something to add on that. It's just definitely a good question though.
I mean, I think it's like keeping yourself in check, whether it's video games, food, Netflix, whatever. If it's my general rule for myself is if I need something, then it's time for a new tool. If I need it, because then it becomes an attachment, which can become a part of the identity. And unless someone's going through a really extreme life circumstance, more than quarterly is a lot. If there's not space for the answers, it's like taking a deep breath and never exhaling. You can only receive so much information before it's time to exhale to keep that tantric flow or that in and out flow of the lessons. And it's like always asking a prayer and not waiting for the answer, or not leaving any space for it. And so I think that in these conversations, it's really necessary. A person may not get physically addicted, but they can get addicted to connection in those circles and not know how to get that same connection outside of community in that way. They can become dependent spiritually, where they're feeling disconnected. So the need is to go to a substance to connect versus practicing sitting out under the trees, breathing with the air, listening to the leaves. It takes a practice. And so I think that it's an important conversation that, dogma or not, you can assign the same dogmatic approach to psychedelics and plants as people do with religion, that you have to wear white and it has to be done this way and you have to be quiet. All of that becomes just as dogmatic, and it exists in this world too. So finding circles that are supportive of you individually, and reflecting if you've been going a lot, and just being like, hey, so you went last weekend. There's nothing wrong with it. And sometimes you're in a process, and check in. It's something that I do with my friends all the time. Or if their body's looking tired, mentally they may be enjoying the openings, but physically it's showing fatigue, and it's considering the entire organism and our whole experience. And really, what kind of relationships do you want to build with these spirits and these plants? If you're always going and asking and taking and not offering or having a reciprocity to the process, it reflects here too.
Just for me, in my experience, the thing about it is I had experience before I was ever introduced into psychedelics. We talk about having our own revelation and our own inspiration. Growing up within religion, I think in our family, I don't know if Jason's situation was similar, because I am a little bit older than him, and we did have varying, lived in different homes because our parents, we had a yours, mine, and ours family. But just for me and my experience, I had these experiences prior to psychedelics. And then my spiritual journey out of course, was a little different. So what happened when I started with the experience, bringing psychedelics in, having my first ayahuasca experience before I did any drug, and then being introduced to mushrooms and in a safe place with my brother, what I found for me is it was more of a tool to where I could trust myself and not question it. That it was about really ultimately trusting the still small voice or the inner voice or the intuition, when culturally we were told to have that, but then there was so much confusion wrapped around, well, if it doesn't match what outside authority says, then you need to question what's coming from the inside. Hope that makes sense. So as I started using psychedelics again, it dropped that ego or that questioning of, am I crazy? Is this really the right answer? I was able, it's helped me really to get back into finding connection with my own intuition and trusting it. And so for me, I haven't gone and had 30 ceremonies. I've done mushrooms 6 or 7 times. I've done ayahuasca once, and did acid once, but found that for me, it was more of, here's a tool, here's a shortcut for me to really be able to trust, again, my own intuition.
Well, and trusting your intuition can be hard leaving Mormonism. I mean, we were taught on one hand to trust it, and we were taught how to connect with it in a certain way, in hearing that still small voice, but only if it was saying things that the church wanted us to hear, right? If it was something about getting in touch with our body or our sexuality, then no, that's from the devil. So in one hand, it taught us to connect, and it's where, I mean, it's a great question as well sometimes. Like, do I become too dependent on a psychedelic, or do I become, you always have to kind of keep yourself in check, because anything, you can be too attached to anything, including psychedelics. And I love how everyone's saying here that they are a tool, and that's what they are. You can use that tool for a lot of different things, or you can, if you're using it to explore yourself and to dive in and to do this inner work, it's one thing. If you're doing it for other reasons, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to choose your adventure, but yeah. Kind of rambling, but I made the point.
So there's also Mike has a question. Can you describe the setting of your first experience on mushrooms and how that helped with your anxieties of taking it? And obviously, I think everything's best experienced outdoors, being connected to nature. Sometimes it might not be easy if it's in the middle of winter. And maybe Tammy, you could talk a little bit about that, because I took you on your first journey, and I think we were outside, inside, and how that kind of played into it.
Sure. I don't want to be one out here the most. Yeah, I was very nervous. I was a rule follower, following the rules. And so at, 42 years old, my little brother, was like, come on, let's experience. And both my brothers actually created such a beautiful, safe environment. I have a brother that was living currently up by Brighton, and it was fall time. And so it had actually just snowed that weekend, and we're all wrapped up in coats. He has a big deck on the back had a fire going. And was there fear? Absolutely. Was there nervousness? Absolutely. But I was with a group of people. I was with family, and maybe I was especially blessed to be able to be, with the safest people I could be in, in an environment that was safe. And outside, it was just beautiful, just sitting around with family, having conversation. And then all of a sudden, it was just an intensity, a clarity came in first. And, I don't know how much. Jason was the one that he was actually my shaman. He was my guide in the whole process. I have no idea how much he gave me. But it just being able to, I don't even know if I can use words to explain it, but to just see nature as it is. And talk about one of the most spiritual experiences that you can have is to literally feel the love, feel nature, see the mountains breathing as a fresh snow, on the mountains, and having a conversation with fire. Was I tripping balls? Probably. But I don't care. I have my experience, right? I had a conversation with fire with this big bonfire, and as people were coming and going in and out of the house because it was cold, I got this sense of that was what that fire was made for, is to give us warmth in that experience. Like, that's what it was created for. And for that moment, for us to all come together as one, and then experiencing different things going in and out of the house. But anyway, I kind of wander, and I'm hard to stay on topic. So, but that was my first experience. And again, I've also had another experience that was awesome last summer. Jason and I took some mushrooms and went up to Snowbird and hiked down and went on an adventure. It was fun and it was recreational, but I also was able to see so many beautiful things and process in that capacity too. I've done it in a ceremonial aspect. I've sat with people in a recreational aspect and been able to receive and process and heal in all of those different spaces. So it really, I think, is such an individual experience, and you just have to go in and surrender. I think that's the biggest thing, is if you're going to take it, acknowledging the fear, acknowledging the emotions that come with it, but then also allowing yourself to surrender to the experience and whatever comes, whether dark or light or just painful or uncomfortable or joyful. One thing I've learned in my medicine, whatever journey or experience that I've had, is there has always been something to learn from it, and to process and to integrate into my life. So.
And definitely second the surrender thing, because my very first experience with psychedelics was in Peru in the jungle, and I was about to do ayahuasca, and we were there for 2 weeks. So I did 7 ceremonies and like countless other plant medicines. And this is still before I had even tried alcohol or weed. It was like jumping into the deep end. So yeah, there was a lot of fear there, because I'm like, what's this going to feel like? I just had no idea. And so the setting for me was really important, and it was very curated. We were in this gorgeous maloca, which is a straw hut, this ceremonial space in the middle of the Amazon jungle. And the only light was candles, and we could just hear the sounds of all the animals surrounding us in the jungle. It was very peaceful. And the one thing I wanted to speak to, the fear, was for my first ceremony, nothing actually happened. And I think it's because I was so terrified of what was going to happen that I was just like, oh, I don't know. And so the next day, I got out some mala beads, and I was doing, they have 108 beads, and on each bead you say a meditation. And so for me, I just chanted Ram, which means safety. So if you don't feel safe, it's hard to really connect. And that was extremely helpful for me as far as setting an intention, which I also wanted to comment on as far as using psychedelics as a crutch. I think if you go in with the right intention, for example, or you go in with the intention to heal or you're present, it can give you the right space and put you in the right state of mind, not to use it as a crutch if you continuously check in with the right intentions.
I love what you said, Shalise, with intention. When you take the time to get clear on what you want, then that helps to see if you're in alignment. The more that I was able to stop seeing things as so binary, black or white, right or wrong, and just look, is this functional or dysfunctional for who and for what? And when I just asked those questions to myself, that started to remove a lot of the dogma, because then it didn't become about, it was the church right in what they taught me, because even that came down to who taught me, right? And so I think that the opportunity we have as we get into the conversations around dogma is, I just started to remove that anything was right or wrong, including murder, including rape, including whatever. It is dysfunctional. And, I can say that it's inappropriate. I could say that it's hurtful. I could say a lot of things that still doesn't make something right or wrong for the action is. And so as I started to look at things, removing them from generalizations, whether with, power plants, psychedelics, whatever, the same happens in the conscious community with language. There's virtue signaling that someone isn't, they're not good enough, or they're not being righteous enough as a conscious person, or they haven't studied with the proper indigenous cultures, or, you know what I mean? Like all these things transfer. And so when I started to expand my own perceptual lens outside, psychedelics and power plants gave me one perspective to view from, one lens to view. And then I started to say, what other things do? Well, working with people, or somatic modalities or meditations or yoga, just exploring the third dimension where we are right now, exploring things that challenge my beliefs without being a threat to me was such a huge part that, I've been, I just went through the Q&A and someone was talking about ego, and the dangers of, or that's the one we already answered. But when even looking at the term ego, right? Oh, you're going to dissolve your ego. Ego was still a concept developed by one man. And so even when I say this idea of an ego according to who or what, I even let that go, right? Where it's like, well, this is your ego speaking. I am me. Am I operating in the ways that feel integral to me? Am I building the life and reflecting the kind of characteristics and behaviors that feel how I want to operate? And forget about it if it's ego, and forget about, again, it's another way to self-shame if we're operating from an ego space. And so I even let go of this term of ego and this concept. There's another book by James Fadiman and Jordan Gruber called Your Symphony of Selves. And it's literally about identifying you are lots of different parts, and certain people might bring out a shadow part of you. That doesn't make you right or wrong. It brings a reflection and an opportunity to readjust or realign. And it's about a healthy practice is when you know which self for which environment at which time is quote unquote appropriate. And so even letting go of the idea of ego, even letting go of the idea of shamanism or mysticism, and allowing yourself to be in the question, and asking lots of different perspectives and trying them on like outfits. If you, as a general rule, working with one facilitator for a year is beneficial to kind of get your feet on the ground, to kind of get a comfort level in the psychedelic space, and then learning from other teachers. Because if one person is ever telling you this is the way that it's done, that's my first red flag, because that means they are rigid in how they're operating. And so that's my thing that I watch for. If someone goes, your ego's talking, I'm just like, okay, thanks for sharing, and finding people that are supportive of how you operate, how, whether you're journeying pretty frequently, or you are operating from a space that might be a little bit toxic, or the behaviors or whatever, the opportunity is to find someone that works for you. Whether they may work with mushrooms or wachuma or a different plant. It has more to do with the facilitator and the space they create for you to be safe, like you were saying, Shalise, so that you can actually access the places within you. If you don't feel safe, if you're not with someone that feels safe to you, you will not go to the places that you could, because your body won't allow you to. At least that's what I've witnessed, not to project that as a rule. But for you, Tammy, to have a brother, have someone that you feel safe with,
is more important than someone that has a shamanic background or generations of indigenous upbringing. Because just because someone is a shaman or a curandero or an ayahuasquero does not mean they operate with integrity, that they are not still privy or capable of sexual predator energy or anything. And so no matter what space you enter, if you walk in, no matter how far you traveled or how much money you spent, if any part of your body says, it's a no, turn around and leave. Even if you feel you might be getting in your own way, until you learn those cues, they've helped you survive up until this point. Even if it's time for them to evolve, and trusting yourself, no matter what culture, what background, what substance, what container, your body will lead you to the space that is safest for you. I'm so grateful for those here that they have found those safe spaces. That's not the case for everyone. And so, more trauma can be created in these spaces. So whether it's through someone saying, oh, well, it's your ego. Well, Freud came up with that. And at the base level of who Freud was, he believed humans were innately terrible. They needed to repress their sexual energy, and that they were animals that were disgusting and vile and terrible. So I don't know how deeply I want to take someone whose core belief was that into a rule that that's what an ego is, or a super ego. So everything you hear, take it with a grain of salt and ask yourself, what do I believe? How does that feel in my body if I try that on conceptually or with substances or whatever. So that's my rant.
I just want to quickly second that. Oh, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
No, second away, Shalise, then I'll hop in.
Only because I've heard it come up a few times now with multiple people in this group. So Cole, you brought it up first about plant medicines connecting you to your body. And I think that's such an important thing that is lost all of the time, because in Mormonism or religions in general, we're taught that our bodies are shameful, or we're taught that we're inherently sinful by birth. And it's just so words. Our bodies keep the score. Our bodies hold so much emotion and so much information. And so a lot of times, even in general society, we're taught either to listen to our brains or listen to our hearts, but no one to the body. But it's so important to get in tune with that, especially with plant medicine or even just day-to-day life, checking in with your body and asking, is this right for me? And we always get those gut feelings. There's so many times our bodies are trying to tell us things, but we ignore them either because of our intellect or because what we think our heart wants. So I just wanted to call that out intentionally, because I know a lot of people have touched on that, and I just think it's a thing to be aware of.
Crystals?
Yeah, I just want to just give a big hell yeah to everything that everybody has said already. Shalise and Tammy, Cole, Mike, and Jason. Just touching on a couple of the questions that are popping up in the Q&A. My relationship with the Mormon Church has gone through a lot of weird waves and ups and downs. And I find myself in a place now where I can appreciate aspects of the church and specifically members of the church who, if I put aside the predatory practices of the institution of the church and those who would hide within those predatory practices, I can get down with the people who believe the church is about being charitable, being kind, doing good things, doing good deeds, having a spirit of adventure, being a pioneer, going out and making a life for yourself. And those are loved ones of mine, friends and family who they do not actively support some of the dark, disgusting aspects of the institutionalized church. And so I used to not think that. I used to be very much against the church and everyone in it. But I've thank you, plants. I've come around. I'm being a little bit more open to that. The second question I was going to address is it forever part of my dogma? I don't know the answer to that, because it is difficult to identify what is part of my religious upbringing and what is part of my childhood. They're intertwined, and I can't tell the difference between the two. So probably it'll be rattling around inside of me forever. But the cool thing about that is, just like the universe infinitely inspansive, I don't know if inspansive is a word, but I am that. And I can be vast and contradictory about who I am, but there is not that middleman of the church to tell me who I should and shouldn't be. And then the last thing about Terence McKenna, Terence McKenna is awesome and says cool things, but I don't want to get into a dogmatic approach of a person tells me there is one right way to do a thing. Jake Whedon, who spoke earlier, talked about, he in fact introduced me to blackout goggles that are basically real life virtual reality goggles if you take psychedelics with them. But I don't believe that the only way to experience medicine is with a blindfold in a quiet room and a huge dose. I think that there are all versions can be edifying and beautiful and fun, and it's okay to just play and have a good time, and it's also okay to dig deep and do the work. That's enough of me talking. That's it.
Doug, I totally want to praise hallelujah and say amen to you on that. Again, it's going back to the hero's journey, right? To the soul journey and what works best for you. And I think that can feel a little terrifying, especially when we grew up in a culture that we have the, I don't know, what are the things when you're bowling, we had the rules and the guidelines to protect us and to keep us safe. And so when we're given this free reign, it can, and this openness and this expansion, it can feel absolutely terrifying. Instead of being swaddled up, in a blanket, feeling that safeness. One thing for me, and I just want to tell you, Mormonism is embedded in my DNA. And whether it's culturally or religious, I still, I was very into the scriptures. But I believe I interpreted them in a different way. I've gotten to choose now. I get to choose now how I get to integrate them. I don't use them that often anymore. There's definitely other books that I've read that I've been able to learn from and grow from, but the scriptures were my language. And I have become more, stepped into Eastern philosophy a lot. And I'm able to look back and see different things that was spoken in the Mormon language that resonate with me in Eastern philosophy language. So again, with my journey being so different than I think most people, is I didn't have the trauma, the individual trauma. Now I did see it within my family, within people I love dearly, and that's where the pain is going in and feeling the suffering and pain of people that hurt in the space and in the institution. But for me, again, it's the human experience. And I'm going to take what I want to take, and I'm going to create my own religion or that works best for me. And so I've been able to, take some of it and throw and keep it because it just resonates with me, and I've been able to get rid of some of the other bullshit that just doesn't work and that's caused pain for people I love dearly. And I think that can happen in any facet or any institution or in any space that you have given authority to someone else. You get to choose who is your authority, or if you don't want it to be authority at all. And this can happen in any facet, in medicine, in science, in philosophy, in religion. That's how I believe I've been able to just take what I want. I'm a 44-year-old woman, and I can make my own choices, and I will also have to deal with the consequences of what I choose to believe and what I don't believe. So anyway, let me get off my soapbox and pass it to someone else now.
You know,
Mike or Jason?
it's funny, Tammy, what you say, because I think coming from Mormonism, they have a monopoly on truth that we've all, you know, it's all true or it's not true, right? So I think a thing I noticed was hard was you leave one truth that you were told was everything and answered all the questions, and you start to peel away the layers and you realize that's not what it is or what I thought it was. I found myself then also looking for what is the other monopoly of truth that I need to find. And I would also say, you know, getting into, you know, the psychedelic experience, the tough thing is that's also, there's great parts of everything and you got to find, I think, what to integrate, but it's been really hard to deprogram that thought process that there's, at some point I'll just find all the truth. And I think, you know, truth is in everything in different ways. But I found myself trying to like create a new hierarchy of like how this was going to answer all the questions I had. And I think at some point I just started realizing, especially doing some ayahuasca, was you don't know shit and you never will. And I think it just sort of humbled me to the point, like you're seeking the wrong things. You can't define everything necessarily, but there's goodness in everything out there. You just got to know how to look at it in the right way.
I love what you say with that, Jason. It is like the truth is relative to context. There were things that were true for me, even in some of my shamanic experiences, that were true in that experience. A year later, going back to Peru, it wasn't true anymore. Why? Because the rules had changed, or the environment changed, or, you know, whatever. At one point I was told, you can't drink, you can't smoke, all that's out. I said, cool. I cut it out for years. And then when I prepared to go to Peru, and I did my whole dieta every way that I was supposed to, no sex with my husband, like everything. I got to Peru and ayahuasca was like, you don't have to do any of that. I was like, what? Last time you said I have to do that. She's like, no, what I was saying is that it's about creating and preparing for an experience. So if someone was coming over for dinner, you would clean your house, you would set the table, you would prepare because it means something to you. And preparing your body is preparing the internal setting. It's preparing that inside of the self for me to come and join you so that I can show you, so that I can teach you. And when I started to look at things, at all substances, at everything that I was consuming as functional or dysfunctional, for who, for what, at what time, does it put me into alignment of who I desire to be, am growing to be, or does it take me further away? Then it became less about dietas at all, because those were just a framework put together by another human under a certain context that was true under the guidelines. It was true. And so as I started to really try on what works for me and give myself permission to not take other things on, because for me, a lot of the journeys I started in, I found I wasn't finding a container where I could be fully myself, because they wanted me to stay quiet, stay on the mat, and go internally. But I'd been quieted my entire life. I was always too much. You know, it's like the too much, not enough dichotomy I was stuck in. And so if I was emoting, then my energy was too big. When I first met, this is my second husband. My first one was Mormon. That one didn't work out so well. On my second husband now, the relationship that we have, when we went to a journey, they're like, you guys can't kiss when you're here because it's too triggering. So then I was too much love, right? And so it was just this constant battle that I finally realized I needed to create a container for me and for other people like me who had never been able to fully vocalize, to fart or swear or cuss or let whatever needs to come out, because they've been holding it in this contracted state in their body their entire lives. And so I had found that even in the shamanic spaces, I was too much for some people. And until I found spaces where people were like, bring it, emote, dance, yell, scream, break shit if you need to. Just let us know. And that's when my husband and I started to create containers where we said, everyone gets what they need. The catch is you have to come tell us first. Everything comes to the table. And we set parameters and guidelines so that everyone is safe. But there is a way that people also still become too much in these containers. Then they get shamed for not doing it right, or if they didn't get the experience that they wanted, it's because they didn't dieta right. And it's another way that guilt and shame becomes an entanglement in the psychedelic space too. And so I've watched from the Mormon culture that, again, it comes into the assignment. Well, you didn't pray hard enough, so that's why you didn't get your answer. Oh, you didn't dieta right. Oh, you drank alcohol this week. Oh, that's why you didn't get to where you needed to go. And so being really, really mindful that as long as someone is using shame and guilt, even unconsciously, it's still harmful. And so if you feel like you're too much for someone's space, it's not your space. You know, you can find somewhere where you can fully express. For one woman just to yell the F word when she has never said, you know, like really owned just swearing, was all she needed to be set free. One word. And it's not about the word. It's that she had been contracted and holding in for so long. That's how it needed to express and open up. And so it's not that swearing's right or what those words mean or what they don't mean. It's what it represented her entire life. And so what part of Dogma can create is that sit down, just like you were saying, Doug, put on these glasses, take your dose, be quiet, and go in. And being mindful, I don't think that there's any one way. And if you're not getting the results that you want, you've been doing it the same way for a while, maybe consider doing it different. You know, maybe find someone to guide you and be a mentor, someone that's been down a similar path. But I can tell you, every time I thought there was a rule and I'm like, oh, this is the way it's done. They told me in Peru, guys, this shaman told me this is how it's done. Then I would find someone that wasn't the case, that had bacon the morning before, you know, the morning of, and drank the night before and had sex with his wife and then had a huge experience. These are not rules, they're guidelines. And so consider them. You know, people that have a lot of experience, consider or ask questions. But if someone won't take time for my questions, just like they wouldn't growing up in Utah, then it's not my person. I'm looking to learn and to grow. And if someone won't engage with that, it's just not my person. And that's okay. There's a lot of beauty in the teachings of the Mormon Church. I just feel like I actually live them. So I actually live them more, not participating in it. So did I learn it from there, or is it innately who I am? I don't know. I know my husband was raised in, you know, Flatbush, Brooklyn, in a very different experience. And we have very similar cosmologies and how we want to participate and create our life. So would I still be this way without the Mormon religion? Maybe. I know that there are some things that made a lot of sense to me in being kind to people and loving everyone and not judging them or casting the first stone that I carry with me. And I feel more Christ-like and connected to my version of what Christ would be than I ever did as a part of the religion. So it seemed like unnecessary for the middleman. I'm like, I'm connected all the time now. I don't need to wait until Sunday. I fast when it feels resonant for my body. I give tithing in the way that I contribute to groups in the jungle or here in the United States, working with Black and brown communities or underserved communities to ensure that facilitators have what they need to serve their communities. So I pay tithing and actually exponentially more than I ever did with my 10%. So I learned very beautiful things, as you said, Tammy. I still carry with me because I choose to. And it doesn't make a difference to me where it comes from. I'm designing my life day by day. So.
Well, I love that, Cole, because isn't that a form of ceremony? And, you know, like we get to choose what ceremony looks like. And actually, Sarah or Steve, wasn't there a question a few hours back that someone asked about the sacrament? Do you remember what that was? Because you had said for him to hold off and have us maybe discuss it now. But it talked about how the sacrament. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I can find it. Give me a second. So someone tell a story while I go look for that question.
I'll tell a story because someone just made a comment about down in Peru in many shamanic ceremonial spaces, they'll have a side room to take the louder people. But here's where I have learned, and this is what I've been exploring more and more. When we set the container of the main room, we have everyone raise your hand and say, are you open to everyone emoting, breathing, being, doing the things they need to do, that it's welcome here? Everyone raise their hand. We go, great. All noises and experiences are welcome, right? In your area, or if you need to dance and move, we'll adjust. If you need something quieter, we'll move you to a space that's quiet, because quite often what I found is our society says, ooh, you're out of order, let's put you in the back, versus each person being able to be okay and work through their own stuff if someone's stuff is triggering them. For someone farting and being like, oh, that's disgusting. Oh, where did that come from, right? Whatever it is, that was our opportunity to kind of do it in reverse and say, all right, here in the main space, anything goes with your own physical body, no touching anyone else. We have rules and guidelines and, things to keep everyone safe. I'm simplifying here. And then saying, if this is too much for you, we'll find you your little nest, quiet space somewhere else, separate, because there is so much that comes up that gives us the opportunity to realize emotions have been inconvenient. Being too much is inconvenient. We are out of order, which is why we have disorders. And so we kind of flipped the script on it a little bit and said, all right, who is okay if anybody laughs hysterically, cries, screams, yells? And you know what's crazy? When you give people full license to be, they rarely freak out. Like, they rarely go big, actually. But the knowing that they can, if one other person goes big, one person in that moment gets permission for when the time is for them, that they'll be able to. It just may not be in that moment. It's not, when there's actually that safe space created, we don't have crazy stuff happen. It doesn't kick off where everyone starts freaking out. It doesn't, because people learn how to hold their own energy and they learn how to protect their energy, because out in the world, that's how it really is. If we weren't protecting each other from one another emotionally or physically is different, but energetically, we're always said we're too much. So again, that's my perspective. And I think that finding a space for different parts of your evolution will garner different results. If you've always been quiet on your map, what would it be like if you went to a space where people could fart and yell and burp and scream and all of that in the space, right? And so it's really, for me, when a facilitator spends a lot of time talking to someone ahead of time, when you ask a facilitator questions, find your safe entry point, because it could be too much for your nervous system if you're just starting to be in a container like that. And that's okay too. And that is something you get to work through later on to see how far you've come, to see, wow, I'm not affected by other people being in their stuff. I'm no longer affected by if they are too much or they are freaking out, or this person's crawling like a snake and this person's growling like a puma and I don't know what this person's doing. That becomes freedom, because your body reprograms itself to not be reactive, and that's another level of freedom. So it's all a beautiful exploration. That's my story.
I'm loving this so much, and I know everyone is. Just 6 of my heroes discussing all of this. It's fabulous. Yeah, I just wanted to, Sarah found the quote and she'll give it the question in a second. But yeah, while you're talking, Cole, I think someone else's noise in a ceremony, that's just more opportunity for me to focus and do my work on my mat. And if I am drawn to that, then I can send positive energy. But yeah, at first I considered it a negative one. How am I ever going to get anything out of this? But yeah, it's just a good opportunity.
Okay.
Yep. It's everybody's journey. So not just the quiet person's journey, it's everybody's journey on it together.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I find I don't like a group. I want to be by myself. So those are the experiences I'm having, but I'm not on the panel. So I'm going to just ask the question and turn it back over to you guys. Grace earlier asked, what is the main difference between the ritual of psychedelics and Mormon rituals? How does it feel different, and how are the results different? And I'm just going to let you guys take that on.
I mean, I'll kick off just briefly. I think that the more that I started removing generalization, because even in Mormon families, the rituals can be different, right? And so for me, the ritual is anything that you want it to be in Mormonism or the psychedelic space. I don't pray before my meals, but I do sit and send energy and love to the farmers, the truckers that drove it, the people that grew it, the ones that, tended to the fields, whatever it was. So that is still a ritual of sorts. And I think that the beauty is you get to decide what's powerful and impactful for you, what's intentional for you, what's in alignment for you. In Mormonism or otherwise, when I've worked with people that are still practicing Mormonism, I say, you can bring your prayer here. We'll pray before we start a circle, because if that's what your heart needs to feel safe, it doesn't make any difference to me, like, because you getting what you need is perfect. And so ritual is whatever you want it to be, whatever you want it to look like. For me, the results come down to how safe someone feels, and if they have community and people to talk to, whether it's a therapist or a family member or a close friend, as long as they've got some community to be authentic and open and honest with, that's where the results and the integration, I find, is garners the greatest support and outcome.
Well, and I would say, thanks, Cole, is let's reclaim the word ritual. After leaving Mormonism, I think that was one of the trigger words for me, ritual, and along with a lot of other words, but the subconscious responds to ritual. There's a reason why they're so effective. There's a reason why religion, including Mormonism, uses ritual. It embeds things deep into our subconscious. And so the question is, how are they similar? I mean, they're similar in that you are about to commune with your subconscious when you take a psychedelic, or when you go into meditation, or when you do any exploration of the subconscious. Ritual is very important to be able to access that part of you. And speaking of religion knows this, and they put, if you think of like the gargoyles in front of the Catholic cathedrals as a symbol of like, you're about to enter the realm of the unconscious now, signaling to the adherents, we're working with this realm now. And so I just got done with this ritual design program where I created my own morning ritual, where I get up at 5:30, I do some yoga, I do some painting, I do some guitar, I do something. And doing that every day, it just reinforces, and you can see shifts when you're using ritual. So let's reclaim that word. It's not a bad word. I don't know if the question was meant for it to be a bad word, but when we're comparing it with Mormonism, yeah, it's just another tool we can use.
I definitely agree with that. And also with what Cole was saying, kind of just getting rid of the labels entirely. And it's funny because I actually wanted to bring this up earlier when Tammy was talking about diving into scriptures and finding comfort there. There were so many things that I wanted to get rid of completely when I let go of Mormonism, because it was a trigger for me. Like, don't ask me to read a Bible. Get that thing away from me. I would rather talk about my angel cards. But guys, it's the same thing, because you're still drawing inspiration. You're still talking with your subconscious. You're communicating with your guides, but it's just different text. So getting rid of all of the labels completely and figuring out what resonates with you, and also not becoming attached to your new rituals or your new set of tools. Like, don't rely on your angel cards or tarot just as much as you relied on your scriptures, because now you're giving your power away again. So find a ritual, find a tool that helps empower you and bring your power back to yourself. Just being open to many different things without giving it such a structure of a label, or, well, I can't open scriptures because that means that I would be religious, and that's not me anymore. Just allowing it to be what it is. And if it doesn't resonate with you anymore, then let it go.
Well, I love that, because I think that's what it is we're bringing the feminine into religion. It's been so patriarchal and by the rules and guidelines, and that I don't know, left brain thinking, that now we get to be creative. And that is in Eastern philosophy, that's creation, that's the feminine. We're getting to be able to be in a space of being curious and experiment and do what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And before, haven't been really given that space. It's like, this is what you do. This is what takes you to the VIP heaven, right? And so now we get to just be curious. And again, like I said, having that freedom is terrifying, because what if we do it the wrong way? But if we stay in the mindset of curiosity and creativity and being childlike, there isn't that. It's more of just the openness of being able to experience whatever experience it is in that moment. I think about my first time I met Steve, sitting again in my brother's basement, because, families who do drugs together stay together. I don't know. But just meeting Steve, and there were a few people there that were really wanting it to be very serious and ceremonial. And having Steve and Sean, you know, in the background, it was interesting because I was kind of watching, you know, their loud laughter and fun in it, and seeing how it did cause triggers. And but it was fun to sit back and just kind of observe that, and still be able to, for me, have this ceremony of being able to watch people on different planes connect in different ways. And even in the same experience, people were experiencing it in different ways. You know, two people were struggling because it wasn't happening in a controlled environment way, you know, and it was fun and curious to be able to have that experience. And for me, the whole thing was ceremonial, because I learned that people connect differently and in different ways, and you get to choose that. So again, like, I've been in big parties, you know, rave parties, and had a deep connection that was very spiritual for me. But being able to just be curious and open it up to knowing there's no right or wrong way to have ceremony or ritual. Again, we get to be in a space of choosing that for ourselves, and what works best for you, and what works best for me.
Yeah, I think your ritual would just be, I think, something you look forward to, that's important to you or special to you. And I think you know, we come from religion with so many rituals that we kind of shy away from that. But this is where you get to discover what your new rituals are. You get to create them, which I think is really cool. And, you know, one of the few rituals I have that I always love to do if I can is to take mushrooms, and at some point within 2 or 3 hours, be able to watch the sunset. And I think for me to be able to kind of see the cycle of the day and watch the sun go down, and kind of remember that hopefully it comes back up tomorrow, and that we all wake up and we really realize, like, this every day is a very special day that we're given. But that's where I try and find those special moments that can become my ritual. And when someone else tells me this is the ritual you have to do, and I will say, I would be very careful with ayahuasca, because it's a medicine that is pretty dangerous if used without the proper experience. And so it's mostly done with a guide or a shaman. But there's also the shamanic world with ayahuasca can be very ego driven. There's a lot of power and control shaman get, you know, administering ayahuasca. And so I found I loved ayahuasca, but I started to really stray away from it, because I felt like I was back at church. You have to do it this way. You have to do this. Don't move. Don't light the light right now. And it was just like rule after rule, to where it was ruining the experience of exploring this thing on my own. And I would just caution you to be very careful about people that want to be the only source of how you experience that. I think it's important to always practice harm reduction and safety. And that's one medicine that can be very dangerous. Some of the others are a lot more forgiving, like mushrooms and others, but there's also you can always take more, you can never take less, I've always said, because I have made the mistake of taking way more than I should have when I first started trying mushrooms. And I think that's been, you know, respect what you're doing and do your research, and make sure you know what you are doing is what you think you're doing is what it really is, especially if you're doing maybe LSD or anything like that you've tested it, and just be safe. But and I will say, just Mike, your question, having the right or wrong people around you, does it make it a good or bad experience? I think for me, it has a big influence there, that you want to be around people you would enjoy being around with in a very vulnerable or emotional state. If there's people that you would be around that you don't know or trust or feel comfortable with, I definitely would highly recommend not experimenting your own psyche in the middle of someone else doing that as well. That might be a little bit of a wild card. I've seen a lot of examples where having the wrong person around can kind of ruin it for everybody that is a part of that. So that's part of the, being safe, feeling safe, being with people you trust. And if you don't know them, if they're part of someone else's network, you trust their judgment, I think that's totally fine. But I think it's really important you do surround yourself with people when you're doing stuff like that. And I've also learned from many experiences I did wrong. There's also environments I have learned I don't like to be around when I am on mushrooms, and it's big crowds, concerts, festivals, depending, as long as you can have space to yourself. But I'd say experiment and figure out what you enjoy. But I've always found for me, the too many people around that I don't know who are with lots of movement can sometimes be a little unsettling.
We're on the same page, Jason. For me, outside of ritual just doesn't resonate for me. I also learned I'm really empathetic, and like enough that I was taking on like some of my family's illnesses because of that close connection. I can actually pull people's, like if someone else was nauseous, I could throw up and realize afterwards that I was pulling from them. And I'm like, okay, this I didn't know was a thing. And so that was like a whole other element that I just never considered before. And so, if someone's new, like really finding someone to guide that's not in the space first, that can help you learn the field and what to anticipate, not what to expect, but what to anticipate. And I think that sometimes people will not ask questions, or the facilitator won't ask or won't answer questions because they don't want someone to create an expectation. You can ask what to anticipate, right? As far as timing, what sort of things could come up? How has someone handled it in the past? So like those kinds of things help people to also find safety. I was like, cool, have you ever handled a bad trip before? For me, there's no such thing as a bad trip. There still becomes lessons and things on the other side of it, as long as everyone's still alive. However, there are certainly more painful paths to learning lessons. And so you can determine ahead of time, do you want to learn hard lessons with more ease, or do you want to learn hard lessons with more pain and suffering? And that's really, these are variable. There's variances to the paths. And I just learned that I didn't want to learn the hard way anymore. I didn't want to learn the suffering way anymore. It was powerful, did great, but it's not necessary. And Jason, I agree with you as well with ayahuasca. Also, ayahuasca is not like the big plant that everyone should or could run to just because they want results. High dose psilocybin mushrooms is, in my experience, I can only speak to my own experience, far bigger, expansive, kind of crazy of an experience than even any ayahuasca I've ever done, including red, blue, black, yellow. There's lots of different kinds, including Toei. I have experience with really strong brews of ayahuasca. And so, just like Terence McKenna has his lens, he says 5 grams is high. But then if you look at some of the lineages from Africa, or teachers like Baba Kalindi EE, they're doing 30, 40, 50 gram doses. Now, I'm not saying anyone should by any stretch, and going down that path is a long process. Like, it's a slow turning up the dial. You don't start at 10 or 20. They are significantly different. And once I experienced higher dosages, then I realized, wow, these are actually more, I don't like to say more powerful because they're different, but it's not, ayahuasca is not better than, higher than, bigger than. It is different and very particular. And so what I found was, one thing, ayahuasca is not sustainable, and it does impact a lot of communities negatively. And we're building whole communities as humans. We're building cities in the jungle, that the jungle's not made for cities. It's not made for permanent structures. That's not what that landscape is for. And so if we're going to talk about sustainability, mushrooms, anyone can grow anywhere with the right equipment. It grows very quickly, and it's very sustainable. Same with Wachuma or San Pedro. It can grow in so many places and in so many temperatures. And so we're not depleting something that takes 6 years to grow, and not just the vine of ayahuasca, but also chacruna and the other plants that go into it all have to be grown too. And so as we especially in predominantly white spaces, being able to explore other cultures, like some of the teachings of the KI network that is Baba Kalindi EE, and reading and learning more about what it is to do high dose. And it is correct, doing it in the light and doing it
in the dark, and not just eye patch dark, like in the darkness on a moonless night so that it's as pitch black as possible, is a very different experience, even with only 2 grams of something like a B plus or an Amazonia or a Brazilian, than say a penis envy, because there's all these different kinds. And to really know that even when you think you've experienced one plant or fungi, you may have only scratched the surface, the species or music, all of that. And I didn't really go to some of the depths of what was possible to explore with mushrooms until the last few years, and I've been in this for 13 years. And now it's very rare if I journey, very rare, because for me now, unless I have a dream where they, whoever they are, tell me there's something we need to show you or something you need, I learned tools to be able to access awareness through community and meditation and yoga and other somatic body practices that I don't need to go into an altered state to get honest with myself. And I think that was a practice as growing up Mormon, to really be honest with myself and be honest with others was the hardest skill to learn. How to communicate honestly and not protect people from me, because my deepest story was something was wrong with me, that I everything was my fault, and that deep-seated shame. And so learning tools to practice outside of the psychedelic space is key. Otherwise, you do develop more of the thinkers and things too. I'm done.
And just to clarify, penis envy is a type of mushroom.
Correct. Yeah, for
you
anyone
cut out, and all I heard was penis envy and shaman, and I thought I probably met a few of those too. Like, so.
Truth.
It's a very strong mushroom, from what I've heard.
It's beautiful. It's stronger. It's glitterier. Like there's a little bit more sparkle and a little bit more. It's different. And the thing is, like, if you'll go with curiosity into every species of mushrooms, and if you're taking mushrooms and you don't know the species, that's my first invitation for anyone listening, to work with one species for a little while, because it's like getting to know one personality. They're all slightly different, and the more you can get to know one for one period of time, that can actually teach you more about yourself than going to different teachers, even of mushrooms. They're all slightly different. If you stick to one species, ideally one crop, one raised culture, it's like being able to learn from the same teacher for a little while. And for me, I learned myself in greater depths that way because I was showing up in the same filter. Just another thought as you said that, Jason. Thanks for the reflect for anyone that didn't know, especially what penis envy is.
I wanted to just quickly go back to controlling your environment, because I think sometimes we can slip into this fear of, well, no, I have to control who's coming now, like who's going to be in the space with me. And what if it's someone that I don't like? And what if that's going to ruin everything for me? I think going in with the right intentions, controlling what you can and just allowing what you can't. So hopefully finding the right group to travel with and journey with, but not getting caught up if it's not exactly the way you imagined it to be, if it's not perfect. Because also you can go in with an expectation of, oh, I want to do all this trauma work today, and that's why I'm here. And then the medicine gives you something different. And I'm exactly with what Cole said. I don't know if I believe in bad trips, because I think sometimes the medicine gives you what you need, and maybe it's not ideal to what you were expecting, but chances are it's something you needed to work through. So maybe it wasn't enjoyable. I've had not very enjoyable experiences with ayahuasca, and I was like, that was the worst. But then I found out it was just this purging of energy that needed to come out, and sometimes it's not enjoyable. So controlling what you can, try and control the setting that you're going to be in, which is first and foremost. Decide if you can be out and walking around in nature, or if the dose that you're taking doesn't allow for that, prepare ahead of time to be inside in a space, maybe in a house where you can walk inside and outside and have that option. Make sure you're not driving anywhere. Those are the practical things that you need to make sure are in place. But aside from that, just trying to get out of the fear mindset of, I have to control all this or it's not going to go well, and just allowing the medicine to give you exactly what it needs to give you.
let me just, I want to chime on a couple of things. I don't know if it takes us off topic, but there's a couple of things. Cole, you were talking about curiosity. And I know Heather, she sent a question about fun. And, you know, with Mormonism, I feel like we grew up too quickly, you know, and we were taught to treat everything so seriously. And I know I still approach that to all my medicine ceremonies. And I know it's good to approach it with some seriousness because you're doing serious work, but like bringing that fun and that curiosity, I feel like when I'm operating, you know, in my true self, I'm approaching everything with like a fully participating way, right? And yeah, I was just thinking, you know, and it goes back to what Cole was talking about, irreverence. And I think, you know, Jason was talking about with deprogramming, there's just a lot of programming that we have just to be so serious, you know. And I actually had a dream a little while ago with a Joker. Sorry, I've been drinking a little bit of kombucha, so hopefully I'm not slurring my words too much. But, you know, the whole why so serious, you know, I think we can approach this. I know it's serious work, but approach it with a little bit more fun and exploration and curiosity, and approach life that way. And I think that's the place for fun in all of this. That's all I have to say about that. But
And I don't know if the idea of serious, because I always was taught to be serious, take things seriously. It's very important. I replaced everything with intentional. I can be intentional and it can be fun. I can be intentional and be committed. And committed is different than serious. In one of my last Aya journeys, yeah, what I was told, what she told me, however you want to reference it. She said, if you keep digging in the dirt, you'll find it. If you want to create, you have to look to the stars. I was getting so obsessed with figuring out what's wrong with me and doing the work. This is 6 years in. I was a little slower to learn than other people, that it doesn't have to be so serious and hard. And my next journey after that, I laughed, and that was my purging. I couldn't breathe, face was hurting, laughed for 3 hours. And I was like, wait, you can purge that way? I thought you were supposed to throw up. She was like, no, you just need to release. And I was like, oh. And it changed after that. And it's not that I haven't had any that were challenging, but even challenging ones, I found deep gratitude because I knew it was still being presented in the most compassionate way possible, and how much my lens was reflecting how it was being brought to me. If I thought it had to be hard and abrasive, that's how it came to me. When I started saying, look, I'm here to learn, and I welcome as much ease and kindness and grace as I can muster. And that changed even how challenging the groups were. Or I had taken in reverence, right? I needed to be reverent and bow my head to the plant and the experience. And I was like, wait, who told me reverence was quiet versus celebratory? Look at some of the Christian churches in the South where they sing and they dance. And, you know, at my church, we couldn't even have an electric guitar, even though I played. Even at one point, they took out guitar. We could only play classical instruments. Who taught that, what reverence means? And so even as going into doing this work, you can have intentionality, commitment, preparation, and take it mindfully, but it doesn't have to be taken seriously.
I love that, Cole. And Mike, it's so funny that you say that, the why so serious, because I can't tell you how many times I've been in medicine that's like, why so serious? Why so serious? But I realized a lot of it was the conditioning of it had to be serious. Like, we need to take our sinning or our, you know, we really need to talk about this and let's get serious about it. And so it was always so heavy when you went in, you know, having to have the hard conversations. And so that's one thing that continues to come back to me is, why so serious? You know, let's just have fun with life. And, you know, life doesn't have to be so serious. We've made it so heavy and so like this burdensome, down in the dreary world. And it's not fucking dreary. Oh, sorry. Can I say that word? It's beautiful, yes, right? It's like I like going out and just being able to see that, just sit in nature and be just dumbfounded by its beauty. And having, it's not this dreary place if we don't make it that way. And yeah, are there dreary things that happen? Is there shitty things that happen out there? Absolutely. But there's also incredible beauty out there to just like to be received if we allow it, so why so serious? Anyway,
I'm gonna jump in on this one, since Tammy, you outed me for laughing too hard in that one ceremony. Yeah, so I'm in ceremonies, I'm either just this sobbing puddle in the middle of the floor, or I'm just laughing uncontrollably. So with the Divine Assembly, we really are trying to explore, what does it mean to worship? And worship means finding our own self-worth. And oh my gosh, I can do that through laughter much better than sitting bored in a pew. When I started to lose interest in the church, my bishop, he said, "Hey, can we talk?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "I think you're probably not." Well, what I told him was, he said, "Can we talk during Sunday school?" I said, "Well, you know where I'll be." And he said, "Okay, I'll go with you." So we went to Maverick and got a Coke during Sunday school. And so he said, "You're not too into this, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And I said, "How could you tell?" He said, "Because during sacrament meeting, I only see the top of your head. You're always looking down, except when things get weird. Then everyone else looks down and I see your eyes." I've posted some pictures from our Divine Assembly, our worship ceremonies. In one, I'm wearing a onesie. In another, we have some DJs just with great lights and sound. And so it's always the ayahuasqueros. But I get messages, "This doesn't look like worship to me." And so, Cole, I think back to what you were saying. Well, what is worship? Does it have to be boring? Does it have to be a drudgery? So we're having a lot of fun finding our self-worth through laughter, through fun. I happen to think it's probably a bit of everything, but yeah, let's not leave out the laughter and the fun. Okay, with that, I'm popping back off. You guys are doing great. Keep up the good work.
No, I love that. So one of the big reasons that I went to Peru in the first place was to release this childhood trauma. And so I finally, after the first ceremony of not connecting, the second ceremony, I was in it, guys. I was in it. And I was like, "Show me the trauma." Like, I was ready because someone had prepared me. Sometimes when you need to release trauma, the medicine takes you to it and you move through it. And so I was like geared up at this point. And Mother Ayahuasca, the guiding spirit, whoever's in there with me, was like, "Oh, fine. Okay, like I'll show you a little bit, but we got other stuff to do. Like, you're a goddess. I don't want to focus on trauma. Like, that's not why you're here." And I was so confused at first. I'm like, "But what do you mean? Like, it's holding me down and it's so dark." And, I was attached to that of, "Oh, I'm broken now and I have to fix it," instead of just allowing. And once I allowed, man, we went lots of places, guys. We went to the stars, the planets, all the things. And it was just so much lighter and it was more fun and it was beautiful and expansive. And so I think my point is, try not to get attached to your trauma or attached to your suffering or attached to fixing what you think is broken. Just go in with the intention to just release whatever you need to, and maybe just laugh your butt off. Like we were talking about earlier with people wanting to leave if it was too loud. I loved it. And I'm an introvert. Someone started laughing, everyone started laughing. And the energy, like the collective energy of the joy and the happiness, and it was just amazing. And just being able to let go and embrace that was amazing. So highly recommend doing it in a group setting like that.
If I could just jump in here and share something that maybe is along with what everybody's talking about. The most spiritual experience of my life was not singing "Oh, How Lovely Was the Morning" when I was a 20-year-old missionary in Taiwan teaching the Hu family about Joseph Smith. The most spiritual experience of my life was with another panelist, Mike, and we were on plant medicine, and I brought out a Icebreakers mints container. And if you've ever seen an Icebreaker's mints container, there's two openings. One of the openings says one, and the other opening says many. And I brought that out, and Mike and I were freaking out about that because we are expansive enough to choose the experience that we want to have. We can get really deep into it. We can get super serious, and we can do ceremony, and we can get shakers out, and we can wear the thing, and we can purge, and we can do all of the things that are very sacred. But we can also choose many, and we can choose loud laughter and ecstatic dance and moving our bodies and laughing and feeling good and shouting and doing all of the things that just make us feel good. But we are choosing those things. And that, for me, is the difference between organized religion and spirituality. It is that ability to choose one or many, and to be vast, and to contradict ourselves, and to go in there and have the experience that is safe and edifying, and it opens our eyes to the extent of our existence. We can rage like a tsunami and thunder and rain and wind and storm. We can shake like an earthquake. We can be all of the cool things that our Mother Earth displays for us. But we don't have to take it so fucking seriously, because we are just very brief in this beautiful existence. And thanks, everybody. This is the last thing I'm saying, but I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for holding this space and bringing such positive energy and just lifting me up. And I'm just feeling tons of love, and thank you. And in true Clubhouse fashion, I'm Doug, and I'm done speaking.
Doug, just add that. I'm so glad you shared that story. And so perfect. And I want to say one more, because I guess maybe this is the last thing I say, but choose your adventure. I mean, I think that's what this all comes down to, with dogma versus spirituality, is you get to decide what it is for you. And we're here to experience certain things. And we're not just here to experience the good, quote unquote. We're here to experience sorrow and grief and pleasure and ecstasy and all of it. And, as my therapist always reminds me, because we were talking about how laughter can be purging, pleasure can be purging, but pleasure can also just be pleasure. And that's okay. It's okay. I know as Mormons, we think everything needs to be for higher good, but I just feel like we're here to experience. So let's experience it, whether it's whatever it is. And so, yeah, I've loved this panel, you guys. I've loved being here, and thank you so much to everyone here. Much love. And yeah, I'm Mike, and I'm complete.
I'll just wrap up on my end, but this is, like you had said, choose your own adventure. And it's pretty liberating to have control over that, probably for the first time in a lot of our lives as you kind of explore this world. So I think the way that this opens up your mind is so incredible. And I think the fact that you're here and wanting to learn more is the first step in that. And for those of you that have already been through that and know what I'm talking about, I just am really grateful to have found it. I don't know where I would be without it. And sometimes I think about that and I get anxious just realizing how lucky I was to be able to be introduced to this whole new world. So, but I'm Jason, and I am done talking too.
Jace, it's been a while since I heard your testimony. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, same. To be able to come into this space of psychedelics and to have this expansion and opening of actually learning to love myself and see my own divinity just in who I am and not what I have to do. that's ultimately what I've learned, and really to just be present in life. And first of all, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to sit here and say, I know without a shadow of a doubt, or the entirety of my being, what is next or after I die, because I'm just going to enjoy every moment that I have in this experience. Just the gratitude of the tribe that I have around me. My family is my sacred unit, you know, and they came from outside sources that didn't have to do with tradition. Like my little brothers, or my heroes, they brought me to the dark side that has brought so much life into my life. So anyway, it's beautiful, and it's an incredible experience. And I've met some incredible people in the community as well, and learned a lot from them. So just enjoy the journey. Just have fun with it, and don't take it so serious. And it doesn't have to be so heavy and burdensome. Anyway, I am complete, and I am out.
I feel like this is a testimony meeting. Sorry. I'm like, do I need to share now? Like, I've never been good at that, guys. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Panelists, you're all amazing. I love listening to you and your wisdom. And everyone attending, thank you for all of your wisdom and your attention, and allowing me to come and be a little wild and crazy and speak my truth. I'm complete.
So I'll say my final. I talked plenty today. So I always like to leave some other practical tools that really helped me outside of psychedelics. One, human design. For anyone that hasn't, I put it in the comments. There's a bunch of websites you can find. I like the one I just posted because that woman makes little videos and explanations and things like that. And then a couple books as far as resources. One, Mind Body Code by Dr. Mario Martinez. Talks about how the body gets patterned into ways of operating. So in those moments that you get stressed, you go back to the old patterns and behaviors. It's because it's an embodiment, and that's okay. Giving yourself some grace and some kindness, and don't use psychedelics as another means to be hard on yourself for not doing things right. Another amazing book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Another great book, Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. The Energy Formula by Sean Wells. If you've been on a lot of medications and you're trying to figure out how to come off of them, there's a couple biohackers that have gotten into psychedelics that really know how to help people get off SSRIs. You can read it in his book, The Energy Formula. And he talks about his experiences. TRE, which is a somatic modality. You can go to traumaprevention.com. You can do, right now they've been doing a lot of virtual things, but it's a way to release stress from the body without psychedelics. And all of these tools, it's about building your toolbox so that you know what to use when. So I always like to leave some kind of like practical things that have helped me in music. Going to drum circles, finding other ways of tapping in without having to ingest anything, so that no matter where you are, you can find peace and connection and love and purpose and passion and anger and frustration. It's all, in my cosmology, it's all sacred, it's all divine. To me, divinity is not peace and calm, it's all of it. And that doesn't mean I have to like everything I'm grateful for, but I'm grateful for all of it. So as you go through your explorations and explanations and changing of those, know that I love you and you're on the right track, the track that works for you, and keep trusting yourself. And if something's not working for you, let it go, no matter how much time you may have invested into it already. Some things have a season, some things have a year, some last a lifetime. Let the things go, or be open to receiving things that maybe you haven't considered before. So the next step's not the last, it's just the next one. This is Cole, and I'm done speaking today.
That was fantastic. I had very high expectations for that, and you guys exceeded it in every single way. Thank you. Just so fun to be able to hear all of you talk and share.